a similar pain. Suddenly, Xiao took advantage of a magical strengthening to continue the battle. Frightened Yua let Jane urgently urged Jane to end this upstart. Naturally, he recognized this technique of Ganqi and could not believe his eyes because such a young guy could not achieve such a result. In addition, it is impossible to collect all 8 elements of the body of Qi, otherwise it would have been dead. Meanwhile, Lin gathered his thoughts and once again hastened to attack Jin, who stated that he could not deceive him because he could not collect all 8 key elements. A moment later, Xiao began to move much faster and imperceptibly took out his dagger. Then, with a lightning-fast movement of his hand, he cut his throat with a self-confident fighter. The young man noticed that he had killed a huge number of people, and now death has come for him. Soon, the teenager rushed towards the frightened Jiao and Qian. They immediately backed back. Having put a knife to the throat, Lin demanded to give him the records of his atrocities, and then he would survive. In fact, in a past life, Xiao took up the investigation and found out that the fat man was a drug dealer. Of course, the cowardly Borov began to say that they had never done anything bad. At this moment, Li said that she also never wanted them with her brother's brother, adding that she just wanted to part with Zhuan and stay friends with him. The fat man, in turn, could not stand her in a brazen lies and gave her a slap in the face, urging her to shut up immediately. Xiao was not going to endure their antics and intended to finish them as soon as possible. Li instantly began to insult Chen, stating that she had never loved him at all. Then she said that it would immediately personally bring these notes to the teenager. Lin said that if Yu Yes moves, he will no doubt cut his throat. But at the same time, Qian understood what these notes threatened with him, in connection with which he demanded that she do not dare to carry them, Xiao. At that moment, outside the window they heard the characteristic sound of police flashing lights. Law enforcement officers followed directly to a huge estate, yes. The frightened Yu asked if he really called the police. The young man answered positively, adding that he will not personally scold his hands about him, and now he will have to spend a long time behind bars. By that time, Zhao brought several books and said that they contain a complete list of CN crimes. Suddenly, police officers ran into the mansion and arrested the girl with yes. After a certain time, the main character went with the police to the department, where he was thanked for the capture of criminals. Captain Hua said that for many years he tried to catch these bandits because they committed many crimes. In addition, they constantly changed names and ran from law enforcement officials for 6 months. The young master also thanked them, because if not for them, he would have problems. But most of all, the young cultivator was struck by the fact that Jen was able to survive, despite a mortal wound. Suddenly, Xiao asked Yun how they would punish the drug dealer Qian. The captain confidently said that he was only facing the death penalty, and he would personally insist on this. Lin was again surprised because an honest policeman is really rare in their days. After that, the guy rushed home, while he managed to hide the gloves of his older brother. What Swan will be immensely happy, otherwise the captain of Hua would definitely confiscate them. Meanwhile, Jin and the frightened Yu were in prison and waited for their fate. C could not come to terms with the fact that some high school student beat him. Suddenly, he grabbed the fat man by the throat and ordered him to tell everything that he knew about this boy. The cowardly Qian immediately told him everything, including the address and the presence of the elder brother of the disabled person. Jen was pleased with this result and hastened to remove the handcuffs with a master key. However, he was not able to do this. Then he decided to call his brothers. Jin issued all the necessary information and ordered to hang this Maltz on the bridge. The next morning, Xiao presented his magical gloves to his older brother. The dumbfounded Zhuan asked where he took them. The young man told the story of how he bought them in a second hand. Naturally, he did not believe, realizing that the teenager went to extreme measures to return them. The guy, in turn, smiled and thanked the younger brother. Lin urged him to calm down. Xuan noticed that he perfectly understands. In fact, Xiao hardly returned the family relic that he got from his parents. The young man smiled and said that he would never lose these gloves again. At that moment, they knocked on the front door. As it turned out, it was Yang. A perplexing teenager asked why he came. At the same time, he remembered that this is the only friend who did not turn away in a difficult moment. But in a past life, Death suffered. Extremely worried whether he urged a friend to talk in the house and not stand on the threshold. Soon, Jan said that the sect of dark matter was hunting for them, and they want to hang Xiao on the bridge. In this connection, he began to say that it is better for them to collect things and immediately get out of here. However, self-confident Lin said that they would not run away and will repulse this faction. But Jan continued to say that he could not cope with them, since their stage of development is much higher than him. The guy noticed that if they run away, then tomorrow they will come for Li and just kill him. The fat man was shocked by such an answer, and still stood on his own, saying that they could not be saved. But Xiao was not scared by high-ranking fighters because last night he dealt with a stronger opponent, which most likely was connected with this clan, and asked them to avenge him. In this regard, the teenager immediately called on Yana to hide Zhuan in a safe place. He himself hurried to pick up the gloves from the older brother to finally end the ill-wishers. The guy handed him a family relic. Lin knew how to use them in such a way as to increase his strength 10 times. Naturally, the main character met with this faction in a past life, but he did not think that they would appear so quickly. At the same time, the young master was well aware that the world has long been divided into light and dark. Of course, law enforcement officers could affect the situation, but slightly, while in the Guild of Dark Matter is full of different masters and each of them is ready to kill. One thing could be said for sure: there are no good people in criminal organizations. But the world is so arranged that the weak are sent to ordinary work, strong fall into the ranks of the police, and only back to the bandits. And the path of the young cultivator was fundamentally different from the life of an ordinary person. Suddenly, Xiao caught himself thinking that he would like to go to the world of the immortals. However, for this it was necessary to become stronger and try to modify the knife, because it could only be improved twice. What Lin began to do once again, it was the last attempt to improve. After a certain time, the young man still managed to improve the blade, and he instantly changed his appearance. But Xiao embarrassed one important point. The metamorphoses suddenly stopped. Suddenly, he realized that he managed to make a double transformation of the dagger, thus increasing the level of hardening and, accordingly, the forces, which was an unprecedented result. In addition, the weapon possessed two elements, fire and water, between which it was possible to move. At the same time, it was possible to change forms, and he looked much better than the previous one. Paying attention to the vase on the table, the guy decided to check the properties of an improved knife on it. A moment later, the water attack defeated the vase, rushing through the entire room. The outcome was pleasant. But at the same time, the table was damaged with this. Xiao did not expect the blade would become so strong. At this time, the elder brother of Jane, named Kun, who was the leader of the Quan group, headed for Lena's house. Naturally, the head of the guild wanted to take revenge on his younger brother quickly. After a couple of seconds, he easily knocked out the front door to the teenager's house, who immediately attacked him in response with his modified dagger. Then he demanded that the stranger immediately bought him a new door. The brutal Kun asked if he really almost killed his brother. Xiao noticed that he himself was to blame for what had happened, and he should not touch him. The representative of the Quan group immediately rushed towards the young man, trying to attack him. However, the guy easily dodged his blow, which literally struck Kun. Then they again clashed in a fierce duel, where the forces were approximately equal. Lin said that he would not defeat him with such simple techniques, and soon he would go after his brother. At the same time, the master used his strength to the maximum, but could not achieve the desired result, because Xiao was absolutely easily and naturally left all the attacks and managed to mock him, saying that he is too weak for the fighter of the third stage of the body of normal Qi. Kun, in turn, noticed that he had not met such strong opponents for a long time. So, the night promises to be extremely funny. Lin in response only smiled at him. Soon, the leader of the attacking group once again attacked the protagonist, saying that his blow contains 2,000 kilograms. Having struck the crushing force, Kun again could not hit the target, because the young master remained unharmed. After that, Xiao grabbed his hand and pulled down, saying that one force was not enough, adding that even his younger brother was much stronger. At that moment, Lin spent a series of attacks. Kun replied that he had no right to laugh at him. The guy immediately bounced back. Then he said that he did not even think to laugh at him, but simply states the fact. The even more angry, the already distraught leader of the Quan Guild. In fact, the young cultivator perfectly understood if he were quickly, Lin would have already been dead. Moreover, the impact of the master would clearly be enough to send him a deep knockout. At that moment, Kun attacked the guy and spent a powerful series of blows. However, Xiao once again blocked Suan with all the attempts of a furious fighter. Suddenly, Jane's brother realized that he needed to change the fight tactics in order to have a chance to win. But at this time, the teenager took advantage of the moment and inflicted a fairly strong blow. As a result, he broke Kunya's nose. He noticed that he had not seen his own blood for a long time, adding that he really underestimated the malts, and he is quite capable of competing him. Lin began to understand that his forces are not enough to finally deal with him. After all, he already carried out 2 crushing blows and was only able to damage his nose. Kun himself said that he had not yet demonstrated all his power to him. Xiao suspected something was wrong and began to reflect on which trick he would throw the next. Suddenly, the leader of the clan rushed towards the guy, but this time his speed was much higher. After that, with the help of his magical abilities, he inflicted another blow, thus literally breaking the wall to the neighbors, which the young master did not expect. Naively believing that he had defeated Lina, Kun said that now it remains to hang him on the bridge by Xin Yi. But unexpectedly among the Dust Club, he saw something radiant and began to look closely. A moment later, a magical arrow rushed into it, but Kun managed to evade it. Realizing that in fact the young man has a key weapon, the leader of the group was in shock. After all, he never saw anything like it and only heard from the masters about such a phenomenon. At this moment, the dumbfounded neighbor scaredly asked who they were and what was happening at all. Xiao urged her to calm down and said that soon Kun would compensate her for everything, after which he once again bravely rushed towards the Golovorus, intending to attack him. The water attacks of the dagger, in turn, forced the frightened bandit to escape. Since he was finally convinced that this teenager is an incredible fighter, naturally, Lin followed him, trying to overtake the wounded Kun. At the same time, the guy said that he was obliged to compensate for the damage, and he could not just run away. At a certain moment, Xiao caught up with him and put a knife to his throat, asking, did he really see such a weapon? Trying good luck, Kun suddenly again began to try to hit the main character. However, the young master easily left the attack and again fixed the dagger to his throat. Thus, the ruler of the sect was again in an extremely deplorable position, but at the same time, he tried to have a psychological impact on the guy, saying that if he kills him, he was facing a prison. The young cultivator noted that he really did not want to be in jail, and even more likely to be like such a garbage as him. This, in turn, made Kun think that he had outplayed the teenager. Having stated that Brother Quan will certainly find him, and then Lin would not be saved. After all, he is the strongest master of martial arts in the whole city, and he has no equal. In this connection, he began to behave more confidently, and called on Xiao to lower his dagger. But suddenly the guy began to apply fierce blows with a knife, saying that he would not have the opportunity to report on everything to his boss. The wounded and extremely frightened Kun instantly collapsed to the ground and tried to cover himself with his hands. Then he literally began to beg the young man to stop and not kill him. Lin agreed to regret the bandit, but only in order to send him to his brother to prison, which he later did. After a certain time, they were behind bars, and Kun became furious, starting to ask Jian what kind of high school student this, who almost killed him. Captain Hua, in turn, was again extremely grateful to Xiao and began to thank him. Suddenly, Lin asked Yan, saying that tomorrow he would need his assistance, adding that when he calls him in the evening, the captain should be ready if possible. Hua immediately thought that if the guy helps him to catch all the criminals, he would be honored. However, a law enforcement officer still did not know the true motive of the young man why he does this. Leaving the police station, Xiao recalled the events of the past life, as his lover entered the university with him. And in her family there was a real collapse, and as a result, Qing died, of course. He could not allow this to be repeated. Meanwhile, the leader of the guild Zhao saw on the news that Kunya was detained by the police with the help of a certain student, from which Quan was bewildered and could not believe what happened. After all, it seemed absurd that some high school student would be stronger than fighters of the third stage of Qi. His servant asked if he wanted to cancel the reservation. Zhao replied that he had been paid a huge amount and he could not do this, after which he grabbed him by the throat with the help of his magic and urged his subordinate not to climb into his affairs. The guy immediately began to ask for forgiveness from his patron. Quan immediately let him go. The ward in turn coughed and hurried to leave so as not to interfere with the boss, who intended to initially kill the head of the SE, which would significantly increase his reputation. Xiao meanwhile called Xuani and said that for some time he would not return home. Moreover, tomorrow is the birthday of Qing, and it has no right to miss this event. At that moment, his phone rang. The teenager was surprised and picked up the phone, where a pleasant female voice greeted him and invited him to rent a house. The perplexed Lin could not understand how on earth someone offers him this. Naturally, he refused the service and said that he is actually a poor student. Suddenly, the girl admitted that she was Qing and just wanted to play him. After that, the young lady asked if he was free tomorrow evening, since she arranges a party and hopes that he will allocate time to come to her. Of course, the main character with pleasure accepted her invitation, which he joyfully informed her. However, the young master got the impression that the girl wanted to ask him for something else, in connection with which Lin asked if she had something else to tell him about. She answered positively, adding that her father arranges her date blindly, and she does not want to meet this rich man. At that moment, the girl was shy, and suddenly interrupted her narrative. After all, it was extremely inconvenient for her to ask a teenager about this. But she still found the strength to say in herself. A moment later, Qing asked the young cultivator to pretend to be her boyfriend, what was quite unexpected for Lina, who actually dreamed about it. She clarified that this is only one evening, and if everything goes well, she will generously reward him. Sayo understood that for any young man this was a real gift. However, everything was mixed in his head, and he fell silent sharply from hesitation. Then he finally agreed to temporarily be her boyfriend. Qing, in turn, was embarrassed. At that moment, Qian quietly entered her living room and asked what she was doing. The girl was scared and behaved somehow strangely, saying that she wanted to sleep. Not immediately.
just the one? Stop!
Yo, you the one from Facebook, right?
Yeah.
For the Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Check it out. It's the Series 10. The charger, everything in there.
Get everything? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'll be getting AirPods, Moissanite watches, all that. So if you want to take my number, if you want anything else, let me know.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll just type my number in real quick.
All right, bet.
Alright, let me just type my number in real quick. It's just like business type shit.
Can you,
She
can you
just,
sit in the car? you're about to piss me
bro,
off.
it's just business,
You're
man.
about to piss
She's
me
just
off.
trying to buy a watch.
Can you sit in the car?
We don't.
Can you
We don't need that.
Listen, you don't want me. Can you sit in the car? Listen.
See what it is.
She just buying a watch, fam.
Can you
It's just a
stop?
watch. Like, we just exchanging numbers for this
Can
shit.
you stop? It's just the watch. Stop! Stop!
No, it's straight.
You gotta piss me
It's straight.
off.
Let's take the pocket. No, it's good. Y'all good. Y'all good, bro. Y'all good, bro. It's all good. It's all good.
It's just the watch. Stop!
Yo, you the one from...
Okay, not out. I was running an errand. I got a call from Bruce. He's like, I mean, are you busy? Then I'm
Bruce!
like,
Hi, this guy.
finished all the girls.
Nice.
No.
episode.
Listen,
Bruce
he's my
is finishing
friend.
every girl.
No, guys, like
That's
my
my goal.
friend.
For real.
Nah. Yeah, so he called me and he was like, oh, are you busy? And I was
Ngibonani mawungakhe ungichazisele kahle ngibonani?
Me personally, I fully understand why women are scared to walk at night, bruh. What I don't understand though is why you're running away when it's me. Because when you start running, I'm gonna start running. Now it looks like I'm chasing you. Ganti, I'm thinking we're both running away from the same issue, Ganti.
Lee went to her room, which even more gave rise to questions in her sister's head. Suddenly, she realized that Qing fell in love with someone because she behaved also when she liked Ju. At that time, Xiao began to think that he must be at the party, but Quan could pay an unexpected visit. In addition, he won all previous fights only thanks to a magic dagger. In this regard, Lin began to cultivate all night in order to become even stronger. At the same time, he wanted to get to the stall of the soul in order to comprehend true immortality. And for this it is necessary to become a master of martial arts of the last rank and possess magic. For a certain time, the teenager was diligently meditated, and finally, he was able to improve. What was the signal of the energy, diverging from the young man in all directions? Thus, Xiao was in the third stage of the body of Qi, which was a good enough result. However, he could use the divine resolution only once every 2 weeks. Lin understood that the world of immortals became closer to him, and soon he would return there. The next day in the late evening, the birthday of the beautiful Qing took place, where her father Wen and his wife Yan met many influential guests, among which was the Jiang family. Naturally, Shu and Qin warmly accepted them. Joyful Lao and Chu approached them and not noticed that they had not seen them for a long time. Also, the head of the family of Na asked his young offspring. The teenager broke into a smile and greeted all those present. Qin caught himself thinking that he was really worthy of her daughter and would provide her with a good existence. Meanwhile, the extremely worried Qing diverging from the young man in all directions. While Chu had already arrived with his father, suddenly Wen knocked on her room and urged to go down to the guests. However, the girl was extremely reluctant to go down the stairs and saw an arrogant young man, which Shu urged to talk to his daughter, and after that, they will join the rest, of course, Chu agreed. The guy immediately began to write her a huge number of different compliments, but suddenly, he held out his hand to her and asked him to let him touch his delicate skin. Stunned by such an impudent behavior of a teenager, the girl called him to behave normally. In addition, he is at her house, but an extremely arrogant young man said that he would soon become his home. Then he lay down on the bed and said that it was better for her to reciprocate him, or he would prohibit her in the basement. Qing was simply shocked by such statements of Chu and instantly drove him out of her bed. The guy did not expect that the young lady would be so stubborn and would not lead to his tricks. As a result, he uttered and embittered that he would soon subjugate her and kneel down. And if he does not have a mood, then he will kill her at all. She literally froze in place. Such statements suggested that, in fact, his family is plotting something bad. Meanwhile, in the forest near the villa, Zhao and their minions watched what was happening. Quan noticed that a rich life is too boring, and there is nothing interesting in it. And soon this beautiful estate will fly into the air, turning into ruins. And the machines of such influential people who cost at least several million will turn to ashes. Suddenly, the guards of the mansion noticed a strange young man who arrived on a broken bicycle. Xiao, in turn, could not take advantage of the meter, as the house was in the mountains, and he had to ask his neighbor a bicycle. After that, Lin went to the villa. The bodyguards were puzzled by his arrival. Also, he did not have the opportunity to buy a suit for himself, and therefore the guy put on what was. The guards immediately tried to drive him away, saying that there was no place for the homeless here. The dumbfounded Xiao said that the birthday girl actually called him on her birthday, what only made them laugh, because they really believed that the mouse was deceiving, adding that his clothes are less than their working uniform and therefore he needs to leave. However, at that moment, Qing came out towards him and joyfully ran up to the teenager. Taking his hand, the girl led Lina into the house. The guards were shocked by such a turn of events. Believing that after this incident they would simply be fired from work, Xiao decided to use the moment. In this connection, he turned to them and with a smile on his face said that now he would go to eat expensive food and drink wine. The perplexing SE asked, did he really drink alcohol because he was not 18 years old? The guy said that this was a joke. The head of the family, in turn, thanked all the guests for the presence of his daughter on his birthday. After that, Wen went with Zhang to discuss the signing of a certain contract. But after a moment, they appeared in front of them, who held Qing by the hand. Shu was dumbfounded by such a surprise and wondered who this insolent is. She suddenly whispered to the young man that she needed to hold his hand so that everyone would understand who she had him. Naturally, the teenager was not opposed. The guests immediately began to discuss what was happening. After all, no one had the idea who this guy, the Xian, in turn, was delighted with the act of the sister. After all, she dared to go against her father. The family Zhang also strained this moment. After a couple of seconds, Lin extremely politely greeted all the guests present. Then he called himself a guy Qing. which plunged everyone into a shock state, even Sao herself. Everyone began to say that the party can be spoiled by the presence of this person. Qian continued to rejoice, realizing that in fact this teenager was not so simple. Shu said that the young man should not behave in this way, and if he only needs money, it would be better to get a job. But the main character said that he did not need money at all, and he and his daughter have long been together. Father urged Qing to be careful with the choice of a guy, as one wrong step and their family is the end. However, the girl unexpectedly stated that she really loves Xiao, and they would be married. All guests were shocked by such a statement, being at a loss. The angry Wen angrily said that she had no right to argue with her father, and tried to give her a slap in the face. The young lady reflexively closed her eyes and turned her head, but there was no hit. Because the young master suddenly grabbed the man by the hand and said that he should not do this. Then he added that if he wants to throw his emotions on someone, then he is ready to talk to him like a man. At the moment, the present even began to admire such a brave person. Naturally, Shu accepted his conditions and rushed to go outside to finally figure it out. But at this time, Lao stopped him, saying that he should not be angry with this teenager. Wen immediately apologized to him for his adequate behavior, and said that he simply did not expect such a turn. Zhang blurred in a malicious smile and said that he had to apologize to him. At this moment, unknown armed people broke into the estate. Lao said that today the family of X would cease to exist. Chu immediately ordered the thugs to grab all the guests and not let anyone out of the mansion. A real panic began in the house. Everyone scattered around, trying to escape. The shocked Wen watched what was happening and could not understand what he was planning. In this connection, he angrily asked Zhang what he was doing and why he arranged this performance. Laoi smiled again and said that he never liked Shu, especially since he does not deserve a luxurious life. And not so long ago, he tried to destroy his business at all, so karma overtook the Sayum family. The guests at this time tried to run out into the street, but absolutely all the doors were locked. Zhao, in turn, urged anyone not to go to the black exit, since there are probably bandits. But no one listened to Lena, saying that if they stay here, they would definitely die. Soon they headed for the reserve exit, but it really was closed. Nobody was able to call the police due to the lack of a signal. Therefore, there were muffles in the house. King instantly ran to Xiao and called him to leave, but the guy said that he promised to help her and remain. At that moment, Chu called on her father to have fun before they kill everyone. He gave him his permission. Then the bandits began to drag all the young girls up and kill the old women. But Wen did not give up and began to carry nearby thugs, saying that they would not touch anyone. And while he is alive, Zhang would not dare to do anything. Lao hastened to rectify the situation, having stated that he has not yet comprehended the strength of the body of normal Qi, and therefore will have to resort to extreme measures. A moment later, he directed his gun to the head of the family, as well as his minions. Then Wen realized that he was in an extremely deplorable position and could not do anything. The young cultivator realized that now is the time to intervene and help the SE family. In this connection, he immediately put a dagger to the Chu's throat, but Qian also decided to intervene. The girl took advantage of her whip and grabbed his offspring by the neck, dragging him along, after which she ordered people to Zhang to retreat. Otherwise, she threatened to turn his neck. Qian continued to squeeze the throat to her son Lao and urged him to immediately stop it. She also demanded that all his servants lay down their weapons until Chu finally chokes. Zhang immediately ordered his people to lower the weapon and waited for further instructions. All guests began to admire such a confident girl, saying that she was simply incredible. And only the main character understood that everything was not so simple, and Lao clearly provided for such a turn of events. At that moment, they heard a strange sound on the roof and wondered what was happening. Zhang, in turn, broke into a smile again and looked at the self-confident Qian. The young master unexpectedly urged her to immediately run away, realizing that she was waiting. However, the stubborn girl, as always, did not listen to anyone and acted in her own way. This situation was no exception, and after a couple of seconds, the unknown was jumped from the roof. As a result, he landed right onto the head of Qian, and the girl collapsed to the ground. Even Chu was shocked by what happened and immediately backed back. Qing and Elevated immediately rushed towards the stranger, but the young cultivator called them to stop. However, they did not listen to him and attacked Zhao, who easily grabbed them. Holding Xin by the leg and Shu by the hand, he thereby practically immobilized them. The head of the family finally realized that this master was really extremely strong, and they could not cope with him. Lao, in turn, said that this is Quan, who is the leader of the Dark Matrim Fraction. and he is able to kill more than 100 people without blinking and an eye. Everyone was terribly scared. Xiao also realized that their meeting took place too quickly and nowhere to retreat. Chu urged Zhao to kill everyone except Qing because he wanted to talk to her differently. Quan looked at Van and said that for a start, he would break his hands, and then he would forced painfully to die. But it was at that moment that the main character struck him with a crushing force. Then he began to beat his nearby servants with particular cruelty. Having stated that he will not allow him to harm his lover and he will have to answer for it, Lin continued to beat the once strongest fighter of the city, which shocked everyone into his skills. King caught himself thinking that now the young man is much stronger than he was in the exam. Having finished with Quan, the teenager rushed towards the frightened family of Zhang. The dumbfounded Lao could not understand where the high school student had such an incredible power. The bandits began to defend their patron, although they realized that they could not cope with the guy. As soon as Xiao tried to attack them, Zhao suddenly came to his senses and prevented him. Having released his magic fist, he literally flew into the unsuspecting Lina. However, the teenager managed to block the attack, realizing that Quan could also use Gan Qi. Zhao, in turn, asked who this youth who was able to beat him. The self-confident master said that he knows this name very well since his friends are already in prison. All those present, of course, realized that it was this high school student who helped the police catch the Jin brothers. Wen also realized why his daughter liked this masterful guy. The brutalized Quan noticed that Maltz would have to answer today. In this connection, he ordered anyone not to intervene in their showdown because he wanted to personally take revenge on him. Lin said that today he went after his friends in jail. Thus, they began to destroy the entire estate, finding out the attitude among themselves. The fight was really exciting, and it seemed that the forces were approximately equal. Shu, in turn, urged Qing to go to the hospital with Chen and call the police. The dumbfounded girl asked him what he was going to do and why he was not going with them. Wen replied that now he owed her boyfriend, because the young master bravely rushed to defend their family. Naturally, she perfectly understood that his father was absolutely right, and he needed to help. In this regard, Qing urged Shu to take her sister to the hospital, since Xiao was here because of her. Of course, the father was categorically against this, because he could not leave his daughter. But at that moment, Lao suddenly grabbed Yun by the hair and dragged her on the floor, having stated that no one will go anywhere, and today they will all finally die. Shu and Qing were shocked by how much Zhang turned out to be a vile person. Qin immediately ordered her husband and daughter to leave here, but they could not leave her alone. Suddenly, Lao Yi began to beat a woman, saying that she immediately fell silent. Then he once again stated that no one would go anywhere until he would tell about it. King could not endure this, and without hesitation rushed to the aid of her mother. At that moment, the bandits opened a fire from pistols along it. Suddenly, the girl froze in place. A moment later, her dress began to flood with blood. The shocked whore realized that he was injured. The main character heard the wild roar Shu and immediately turned around, but did not have time to understand anything. At the same time, he suggested that something bad could have happened to Qing and you could not waste time. But since he was distracted, Xiao missed the strongest blow of Quan and flew to the side. Zhao smiled and noticed that in such situations it was impossible to be distracted. Lin said that he was absolutely right because you can pay with life for this, and that is why he will kill him quickly. At that moment, the teenager put on a glove of Zhuan. Naturally, Quan naively believed that some high school student would not do anything to him, even so skilled. But when Xiao rushed his fist in it, Zhao sensed an unprecedented aura and realized that he should not underestimate the baby. The head of the clan noticed that he did not expect such incredible power from him. But this would not help him, because there is no fighter more than him and everyone knows about it. Suddenly, Lin inflicted a powerful blow to him. The glove of the older brother suddenly sparkled with numerous lightning. Then Quan finally realized that the guy's ki is much stronger than him, and he simply could not hold back the blow. Having missed an extremely painful attack, Zhao immediately backed away, not knowing what to do. Xiu, however, feeling the advantage, decided to end an arrogant cultivator, continuing to apply fierce series of blows. Thus, the master turned into a puppy. The protagonist did not let him go for a second and directed a powerful glove to Quan's body. In the end result, Zhao flew off to the end of the room, receiving incredible damage. Everyone was shocked by what was happening. Dumbfounded, Zhang asked how he felt. The bloodied leader of the Guild of Dark Matter said that he could still fight. Then he slowly and extremely painfully began to get to his feet, realizing that he was not enough for a long time. The young master instantly brought down a flurry of powerful attacks on him, but Quan continued to stand. The young cultivator, in turn, hastened to end him, but suddenly saw Qing. The bloodied girl lay on the floor, and Xiao literally came into rabies. Closing everyone with his formidable look, he asked who dared to shoot at her. The frightened Lao immediately ordered his thugs to open fire on a teenager. The bandits instantly began to shoot him, but the young man was actively activated by the magic barrier. Zhang was shocked and even began to think that in fact this guy is not a man. After which Lin once again grabbed his dagger and rushed towards Yi. Lao, in turn, literally began to beg for mercy and rushed to the end of the room. But Xiao said that, like him, has no right to ask for help, because violence should be punishable by death. A moment later, the teenager attacked him with the magical ability of a modified knife. In the end result, Zhang froze in place, then sharply collapsed to the ground. Chu was in shock and seemed to be speechless, watching the death of his own father. The rest immediately fell to the knees in front of the young men, saying that they had nothing to do with it and they were simply paid. Having come to his senses, Chu also fell to his knees, saying that he was never in the know his father's affairs. However, Lin did not succumb to their tricks and finally ended with their miserable lives. But at the same time, Xiao left several bandits alive to transfer them to the authorities, which, in turn, had already arrived at the estate and ordered everyone to stay in the place. But when Captain Hua went inside, he saw a terrifying picture where everything was flooded with blood. The guy stood in the middle of the corpses and suddenly said that they were just in time. As he finished, soon, all surviving thugs were sent to a police van for further proceedings. Wen immediately approached his savior and began to thank him. Yan also joined her husband. At the same time, Shu said that from this day, he was a welcome guest in their house and has the right to ask for anything. Without thinking twice, the teenager said that in this case he would like to marry Qing. Suddenly, the girl opened her eyes and looked at Xiao, realizing that he was really narrowed. The mother naturally did not mind, thinking that this little one was also a romantic. But unexpectedly, Qing stated that this is impossible, since they were familiar with only a couple of days. The shocked Wen, like his wife, could not understand what was happening. Noise instantly demanded an explanation, because earlier they stated that they were meeting. The fool realized that she began to talk about it too early and again got into trouble. Then, the protagonist told the truth about the pretense of her boyfriend, saying that he really wants her to be free. And today she turned 18 years old, and this is an excellent age in order to begin to dispose of her life. Qing, in turn, finally understood what he was talking about. Although she expected a slightly different answer, Ven and Yan were pleasantly surprised by such an incredible speech of a young master. Shu understood that this happened through his fault, because if he had not insisted on an engagement, nothing would happen. In this connection, the father said that the young cultivator is really absolutely right. And from that moment on, the girl herself will decide what to do and what to do in her life. King was extremely grateful to his father for understanding, and thanked him with tears in his eyes. Meanwhile, an ambulance arrived. The guards hastened to spend doctors inside the mansion, where soon the Qiang was carried out on a stretcher, which was still unconscious. Naturally worried parents followed her and got into an ambulance carriage. Wen looked out of the window and looked at Xiao, realizing that he was a really good person. King was also placed with a wound in the car, but she could not say exactly what she felt for Lina. The police at that time arrested Quan and his accomplice Zhang, along with his offspring. At the same time, the guy had a good ability. With the help of it, he could take the fighting techniques of others. At that moment, Captain Hua approached him and offered to join the police, because he alone defeated the sect of Dark Matter. The young man began to say that he clearly lacked skills for this. Moreover, it was necessary to have a Class B. However, Yan assured that with his third stage of the body of Qi, this is enough to become a real police officer. But he must remember, the stronger the person, the more likely he will come from the right path. Then the teenager was finally convinced that the captain really knows about his abilities. After that, Xiao hurried home and said that in the future he would definitely join them. Lin immediately disappeared in an unknown direction. Hua, in turn, looked at him. Then, smoking a cigarette, he thought, realizing that in fact this high school student is extremely dangerous. And since their last meeting, Xiao has become much stronger since I was able to beat Zhao alone. Returning home, Lina met a joyful Yang, who began to say that he was amazing. Zhuan noticed that Hua called them and informed how the guy himself dealt with the criminals. The young man said that this was only the beginning and now the most important thing is to cure his legs, adding that a letter about the reception should come tomorrow. But the elder brother was not so optimistic. After that, Xiao returned Suyani glove and noticed that he also has a gift for Li. Approaching the fat man, he suddenly gave him his modified dagger. A dumbfounded friend thanked him for such an expensive little thing. Because the knife was in the second stage, Ian immediately began to try his new weapon and began to wave the dagger. Lin, in turn, said that today he was very tired and he should sleep well. Going to the room in a good mood, the teenager dreamed of the time when he was at the top of his skill. The protagonist was actually in no hurry to go to bed, as he decided to prod it a little. After all, he needed to switch to the fourth step to finally cure his brother's legs. At the same time, the young master had a special technique of 5 palms with which he could speed up the development process. As a result, the young cultivator began to work hard to succeed. But suddenly, he went blood from his ears, as well as from his nose. The shocked Xiao did not understand what was happening. At a certain point, Lina had to stop the cultivation process, assuming that most likely his body could not withstand such loads with rapid cultivation. The guy was constantly wiped with napkins, but the blood without stopping poured a river. Then the teenager realized that he needed to slow down, so as not to die at all. Suddenly in the morning, Zhuan went into his room to offer to breakfast. But seeing this picture, the older brother misunderstood everything and immediately closed the door. Xiao tried to explain to him that in fact, he decided to meditate a little. But Xuan said that he did not need to make excuses and he understands everything perfectly. The next day at the school, a martial artist said that the Sisters of X received an assessment of A. While most of the class did not pass the physical training exam, it is worth noting that there were only 5 categories, D, C, B, and C. So it is quite difficult for students to enter the University of A. After that, the teacher began to voice the received grades in the class, where the majority had satisfactory marks. But when he reached Xiao, the teacher did not believe his eyes and fell silent for a while. Everyone began to ask him what kind of assessment was there, because Lin was absent in several classes. But after a moment, the coach said that he received the highest rating. C. Everyone was in shock. Naturally, everyone began to envy him, because they could only dream of such an assessment. Of course, Zhao himself perfectly understood that he would have a good result. The students, in turn, began to ask the teacher who was still honored to hand over. The teacher announced that Chu Xiao received an assessment, and with a plus in the humanities, it seemed that the girl herself did not expect such an outcome. Most classmates immediately began to object, saying that she did not deserve such a result. Suddenly, Lin recognized her in her neighbor, from whom he had not so long ago asked for a bicycle and broke the wall in the fight against Kun. At the same time, he did not expect that she could pass an exam in the humanities. Passing by the protagonist, the girl looked at him and accidentally hooked his envelope with work. The young lady instantly asked for forgiveness and began to raise the folder with documents, just like Lin. In the end result, they reached for the envelope together and collided with their heads. This time, the guy apologized to her and asked if everything was fine with her. Chu sharply took her folder with work and replied that she was in full order. After a certain time, joyful Xiao returned to his home, where Swan met him. Having taken out the girl's work from the envelope, the teenager was extremely surprised and realized that when they were faced, they took each other folders. The perplexed older brother asked why there is a photo of the girl. In addition, the name is also different. Lin sighed heavily and looked at his brother. The main character instantly went to a mysterious neighbor to pick up his work. However, it seemed strange to him that the girl's house was extremely untidy and dirty. Having knocked on the door, no one discovered the young master, which was also suspicious. Then the young cultivator pulled the handle and the doors were open. Entering inside, from everywhere it began to hang a cold. There was practically nothing inside the bed and a table with a chair. Xiao unexpectedly shouted that he had come for his certificate and would like to return her a folder with work. But in response, there was still silence. Going further, Lin suddenly discovered the girl on the floor. The dumbfounded young man immediately rushed to her to check if everything was not all right. Chu, in turn, began to come to his senses a little, and the guy sighed with relief. Suddenly, the girl said in a trembling voice that she did not eat anything and was very hungry. Then, the teenager hurried to take her to his home in order to properly feed. After some time, he prepared a couple of dishes for her and began to eat. At the same time, she was clearly in a hurry, since she did not use anything for several days. Xiao noticed that if his brother had not slept, he would have prepared her much more different goodies. But the girl said that this was quite enough and she never ate anything tastier. Chu sadly replied that she had not eaten for 3 days and suffers from low blood sugar, because of which she fainted. Lin was shocked by such a turn of events and said that she in vain wanted to become the queen of weight loss. However, the young lady said that she did not think about it at all, and she simply had nothing to eat. Besides, she was preparing for the exam. Suddenly, the guy asked where her parents, suggesting that they were on a business trip. For a few seconds, the girl fell silent sharply and looked down, after which she said that they had died. Xiao asked her forgiveness and said that he did not know about it. But the girl called him not apologized, adding that he will give him a test which lies under her pillow as soon as it finished. The young man, in turn, thought about how it happened that no one dared to help her. After all, people clearly saw the destroyed building. At that moment, Chu put an empty plate and thanked Lena for the late dinner. Then, with a smile on her face, she said that he would bring his envelope with work. However, Xiao drew attention to her rather strange movements, believing that she was hiding something special. But even at the same time, he really was sincerely sorry for the girl, and he wanted to help her. After some time, Chu went to her home and took a folder with documents. As soon as she turned around, a guy stood in front of her with a mysterious look. The girl noted that he did not have to come to her, and she herself would bring him a certificate. Xiu decided to ask directly why in the exam she could not create a force of 20 kilograms, adding that she clearly hides something important from him, but the young lady began to deny everything. Then the teenager touched her with his hand and asked that she had to be near her neck. Suddenly, at that moment, a certain magical sphere escaped from her, after which Chu unconscious collapsed to the ground. The shocked Lin did not understand what happened. The young man immediately rushed to her help, asking what happened to her. After a certain time, the girl came to her senses, but an unknown radiance still emanated from her. Suddenly, a classmate, writhing in pain, said that she was terribly cold and her neck hurts. The main character did not understand how to help him, the poor girl, and took her by the shoulders. Once again, he asked her forgiveness and saw a certain bug near her neck, from which a magic web diverged all over Chu's body. The young master was in shock, not understanding how the seal of the ice spider settled into it, which he asked her, but the young lady could not say anything except that she was cold. The young cultivator knew one thing. It was necessary to pour Ganqi into it. However, even if he cures her, this can harm him himself, because Xiao was only at the third stage of the QE body. Finally, Lin decided to help her and began to do the necessary procedure. After saying that she should not be afraid, as he really tries to help her, Chu, in turn, seemed to lose consciousness again. The seal of the ice spider continued to grow. The teenager worked hard on ridding the disease from the body of such a young girl. A few minutes later, the result was visible, and the guy sighed with relief. Thus, the seal finally faded, thanks to the divine resolution of the Xiao. But on this, the procedure did not end, and Lin continued to pour over Chu's disease. Gradually, the girl began to recover again, which spoke of her partial recovery. A moment later, she opened her eyes and saw her savior in front of her. Suddenly, the girl burst into tears, asking him not to see her dirty body, because she was turned off the water, and she could not even wash herself. Naturally, Xiao began to cheer her up in every way so that the girl calmed down, confidently saying that he would not dare to see her, and in fact she is beautiful. The young lady burst into tears even more and, hugging Lena, began to thank him for his help. Soon, the young man led her into his home so that Chu finally takes a warm shower. Meanwhile, he thought about how the spider seal overtook it, because in public this technique was extremely rarely used. Suddenly, a girl came out of the bathroom in a shirt of Xiao and noticed that his clothes had come her. Lin smiled at the girl and said that his shirt was really going to her. After that, the guy returned to the question of where she had this ice seal. But Chu did not know the reason for the appearance of the spider and said that she always had such a state. Xiao understood only one thing. Someone practices King Ji Yu and intends to install this seal from birth. The young lady, in turn, urged the young man not worried about her, because she was already used to living like that. But the teenager said that most recently she had become more frequent in her such attacks. Chu could not understand how he knew this. Unexpectedly, Lin asked when she was 18 years old. A perplexing girl said that in a week she asked him a counter question why he was asking. Suddenly, Xie said that at 18 years she would die, as this seal would explode in her. The dumbfounded Chu asked the protagonist if he was sure that this thing would kill her, believing that the young master could be mistaken, but the guy said his forecast is accurate, adding that there is a way to finally get rid of the print of the ice spider. Naturally, Chu began to ask him how he could save her from this ailment. But at that moment, she took a sharp step towards the guy and stumbled on his leg. As a result, the girl literally failed the young man, being on him from above. The clumsy Chu immediately began to apologize, saying that this happened by chance. Meanwhile, the older brother woke up and went to the room of Xiao, where he saw this picture. Of course, Lin tried to explain Suyani that everything was completely different from how he might have thought. But as always, the older brother simply left the room, leaving them alone. At the same time, the guy could not understand why Chu still hugs him, which he asked. Suddenly, the young lady said that he was the first who treats her well and shows care. The dumbfounded teenager did not know how to story himself and simply stared at her in surprise. She became incredibly sorry for the poor girl who never knew the love of relatives. Suddenly, Chu asked that he really did not like her. The guy said nothing. Then he stroked her in silky hair and said that the girls should not behave like that. And if they really are destined to be together, then he will do everything possible for this. The classmate once again wept, saying that he is a very good person, after which she again hugged Lena. The young man did not resist her and hugged her in response. Seo remembered how beautiful goddesses ran after him, dreaming of talking to him. The hugs of Chu were so pleasant and tender that the teenager himself did not want to leave. But unexpectedly, his nose went with his nose, and Lin instantly stepped aside. The worried girl asked what was happening to him and whether he needed help. Xiao replied that everything was in order with him. He also noted that tomorrow, they will have to go to one place where not only his brother's legs can cure, but also her seal. Thus, the next day they rushed to the notorious city of Nanya. A curious Chu asked if the seal can be removed here. Lin replied that for this it was necessary to go to the mountains. However, they had a problem with transport, which had to be solved. At that moment, one idea came to his mind. Xiao hurried to realize it into reality. After a certain time, they headed high to the mountains on a huge bull. What was a real test for the girl, as she first saddled the bull? Having reached the evening to a certain settlement, Lin looked around. Then he said, "They were in place." Chu noted that the village looks abandoned. Shu immediately urged her to speak quieter, because not people live here at all, which pretty much scared the young person. Soon, the main character suddenly took her in his arms and jumped with her offense. Once inside the courtyard, the young master called on her to be silent, so that she would not see and did not hear. At that moment, a huge bull passed them and headed for one of the houses. For some time, the beast calmly stood opposite the front door of an abandoned building. After a couple of seconds, the door opened, from where the long tongue of some monster rushed, which grabbed the bull. The girl, in turn, was terribly scared, not understanding what was happening at all. With the help of the special technique of Gan Qi, the young cultivator grabbed the demon with a magic hand by the tongue. Then he pulled him along, intending to pull the monster out of the house. After a moment, something similar to a person flew out of a collapsed building. In fact, it turned out to be a jab of 5 poisons, who had a disgusting appearance. Soon the monster tried to attack them by directing his poison, but Xiao managed to activate the protective barrier. She suddenly remembered that she had read about this dangerous poison in the encyclopedia. Lin, in turn, urged the demon not to resist and calmly discuss everything, or inevitable death awaits him. But the toad continued to try to tear out the tongue and the hands of the guy. Suddenly, the monster asked how he knew about this place and why he granted. The teenager said that he needed his help to get into their sacred lands. The dumbfounded monster again asked who he was actually. The young man spoke. It does not matter, but he knows that the toad kills girls every month. In response, the demon bounced aside and said that he himself was not without sin, and clearly killed more than one living creature. Xiao once again demanded that the monster calm down and not resist. At that moment, Lin directed his magic hands to the monster and grabbed him by the throat, having stated that he gives him the last chance to save him, or death will take him with him. Finally, the toad agreed to help him find the entrance to the lands that lies through the gorge. But it was impossible to see it with ordinary people, and only he can take them into the wild. Then Xiao let him go. Lin immediately stepped on him and said that he was better not to joke, so as not to go to hell. Naturally, the monster realized that he could not defeat the guy, and led them along the sacred lands. Soon they stumbled upon a huge amount of women's clothing, which terrified Chu. She said that these are all the things of the victims of this toad, and if you excavate these lands, you can probably find the bones of the girls. The shocked girl asked why then the police are inactive then. The teenager noticed that they significantly loses to these demons in strength, so they cannot affect the situation. In addition, this monster is far from the strongest creature in these lands. The frightened classmate talked. Would this monster continue to kill? However, Shay said that in fact he not only came for medicines, indeed in a past life, they prettily patted him, which means that today the demons will die from his hands. The protagonist began to remember how he and Yan were trapped in the bloodthirsty toads. Li blamed himself in everything, since it was precisely because of him that they were ambushed to monsters. The demons, in turn, decided to get rid of them and already wanted to kill adolescents. But suddenly, one of them approached the young master and began to touch his face, then said that people had too rough skin, and he's more likely young girls, which means they need to gobble up. The young cultivator said that if this is really the only way out, then they will hurry better. Jan was completely bursting out, saying that he was to blame for everything and soon they would die. However, the Black Widow decided to leave them, as she intended to play a little with prey. Having said that before getting rid of their bodies, she will personally suck all the blood from them. Lee finally scared that he was literally written on his face. But the Black Snake unexpectedly said that she had a much better idea, adding that she will allow them to escape only if one of them gives his hands. Xiao understood that he had come to real psychopaths who simply wanted to break their psyche. Scorpio with a center. Legged this venture was to taste, and they urged the snake to quickly proceed to this performance. Lin understood that his friend had never been in such situations and was very scared. Therefore, he decided to give his hands. But at that moment, Jan stated that he was ready to give his brushes. After all, it was through his fault that they were generally in this trap. Xiao was shocked by his act. The Black Snake noted that good people in this world are a real rarity. Of course, Xiao was against this and tried to dissuade them, but the snake already grabbed him with his tongue. A moment later, with particular cruelty, she tore off the fat man. The sight was not for the faint of heart. Thus, Lin in a past life lost his best friend and dreamed of taking revenge on them. Meanwhile, he and Chu continued to follow the monster into the territory of the sacred lands. Having reached the dark fog, the toad noted that they should be more careful, because the path is further covered with toxins. Xiao immediately activated the magic barrier, who absorbed all the vapors of poisons. Chu caught myself thinking that even teachers did not have such an incredible force that Lin had. In fact, the monster led them to his lair, where he intended to kill uninvited guests. Suddenly, the girl noticed very rare flowers, but where they came from here she did not know. Xiao also said that in poisoned places, medicinal plants of the best quality, and that is why he came here. In addition, only in these lands you can cure Xuan's legs and remove the seal of an ice spider. But suddenly the demon stopped in the middle of a poisonous field. Lin suspected something was amiss. The monster instantly said that they should go back, because they won't let them go further. And he could not help. The dumbfounded Chu recalled how he himself said that she was leading them into sacred lands. The monster replied that he had fulfilled his promise, and they are now on their territory. At this moment, the rest of the monsters suddenly appeared, who also wanted to kill them. Cho immediately began to persuade the protagonist to run, but Xiao said that in this case, he would not remove her seal. The girl said that it is not important, and most importantly to survive, especially if she is destined to die. Then this is fate. The young master pulled her to him with a sharp movement of his hand and stated that she was wrong, because it is definitely awaiting a happy future and cannot be otherwise, adding that she needs to go forward and he will definitely catch up with her and everything will be fine. After that, the young cultivator sent Chu into the distance of the mountains, with the help of his ability. Then Xiao turned to the monsters and said that it would be better if they were hiding in his holes. The Black Widow noticed that in the mountains a huge amount of miasma, and the girl would die soon. In addition, the guy clearly underestimates them and does not understand what situation he was in. At that moment, a black snake jumped to him, which stated that he would do nothing on their lands. Following her, several dozen snakes rushed towards a self-confident teenager. Thus, Lin was surrounded by vile creatures, but was not at all afraid of them, realizing perfectly well that a couple of days ago it would be a problem for him. But not now. A moment later, the guy used his best ability and suddenly magic fists appeared. The demons naively believed that the young man would not be able to recapture the poisonous attack of numerous snakes. However, after a couple of seconds, Xiao literally disappeared, which was a real surprise for the monsters. The centipede said that he simply decided to play with them, and disappeared for a while. The snake continued to gather in one place and literally flooded the clearing. But the explosion suddenly thundered. Everyone immediately backed back, not understanding what happened. As a result, all the snake's clubs were burned, which the monsters did not expect. Lin himself appeared in a completely different place, realizing that he needed to act quickly. Hiding behind the tree, Xiao began to think about whom to kill the first. The choice fell on a frightened toad, which in turn tried to escape, realizing how much the guy was strong and they obviously not defeat such a person. After a while, the explosion thundered again. The monster suggested that the Malay had already figured out his brothers. In this connection, he immediately rushed towards a dense forest, but Lin blocked his path. The The dumbfounded heel of insects asked him how he ended up here. I ignored his question. The teenager immediately inflicted a crushing blow to him, not giving him time to break. The guy again spent a series of deadly attacks. The rest at that moment heard the cries of the toad and followed a heart-rending sound. The black snake noted that this youth was really extremely strong and it is worth being careful. But suddenly Scorpio called her crazy, which naturally caused a storm of emotions in her. The snake instantly began to make claims, saying that in this case he himself would have to resist the cultivator. The monster, in turn, realized that the guy with imitated his voice to pick them up. Soon, Scorpio alone went in search of such a clever and strong Xiao. Lin continued to play with them, catching them, and eliminating one by one. As soon as the demon took a couple more steps, the guy was behind him. Soon from Scorpio, the trace was caught. The monsters only heard his last shouts. The Black Widow noticed that this young master really surpassed them. The snake, in turn, urged everyone to unite and in no case do not leave each other. The protagonist received true pleasure from what was happening and continued to track the rest. In addition, forests and mountains unexpectedly became the advantage of a young cultivator, what helped Xiao constantly change the location and attack them from the shadows. Soon, Lin rushed towards humanoid monsters to finally deal with them. The monsters, in turn, could not oppose anything to the gifted teenager. At the same time, the young man all the time distracted them with his speeches, which came from different sides. Thus, they constantly spun around, trying in vain to find a guy, from which the demons were only more angry, although they understood that in this situation they were helpless. But suddenly, Xiao said that if they kill each other, the latter would survive. At a certain moment, the black snake could not stand it and rushed towards Lin's voice, having spoke nervously that she personally torn him off. But the teenager, as always, outwit her, because, having come to the sound, she never found anyone. Then she rushed to examine the entire territory. A moment later, Xiao began to speak again. The snake turned around, but the young man was on the other side. Realizing that the Malay had once again outwitted her, she backed away sharply. But it was too late, as Lin pierced her body with a heavy sting of Scorpio. After all, it was she who in a past life tore off the hands of his best friend, and from that day, he dreamed of taking revenge on her. The centipede with a Black Widow could not believe their eyes and literally fell into rabies. After all, the guy killed their patroness. In this regard, they immediately rushed to attack him. The demon fixed his fiery blows into him. The spider also applied the magical web. Thus, they were able to squeeze him, not allowing the opportunity to escape or evade the attack. After a couple of seconds, the explosion thundered. The monsters were shocked by what happened. After all, they killed their mistress, a snake. At that moment, Xiao again found himself behind them. After saying that they finally made the right choice and killed the leader of their gang, holding the sting of the deceased Scorpio in his hands, Lin smiled and asked who would be next. The dumbfounded centipede said that she would finish him off and took out her powerful weapon, what was like a certain gun. Xiao instantly moved to the monster. Then he hit the installation. Thus, the gun of the gun twisted and looked directly into the demon's head. Lin noticed that the situation has changed fundamentally, and now it will have to collect it in parts. Suddenly, the next explosion thundered, which destroyed a centipede. The Black Widow, in turn, got off only with a slight fright and flew to the side. The teenager immediately ran to her so that she did not have the opportunity to escape. Then the young man grabbed the demoness and with her jumped away from the raging flame. Seeing the burned forest on the horizon, Chu fell into despair, believing that her savior could suffer. However, at the same time, at heart, she still hoped that he managed to escape. Meanwhile, Xiao pulled the frightened spider aside, which was rather strange. Even the poisonous widow herself asked him the question of why he decided to save her. The monster looked at the protagonist and again demanded that he answer her. She naively believed that the young master was leaving her beauty and could not kill the beauty. The young cultivator, in turn, immediately threw it to the ground and said that she should help him. The girl began to say that as a man he is obliged to behave properly with the lady. But Xiao did not stand ceremony with her and ordered to take 5 poisons to the treasury. At the same time, Lin threatened her with death. Naturally frightened demoness agreed to his conditions. After a certain time, they hit the road. Suddenly, a Black Widow said that they were almost in place. But the worried Chu asked if they could trust this monster. After all, the toad has already trapped them. And this spider so far thinks something bad. But the guy was sure that the widow would not do anything to them, and would soon lead to the seedling of healing herbs. A classmate noted that they still need to be on a guard. Xiao again stated that everything would be in order. but Chu demanded that he promise her. The perplexed young man promised her that they would take healing plants and leave. The girl, in turn, began to think that in fact he did not like her, and he decided to help her out of pity. Finally, having come to the place, the Black Widow said that medical materials are stored here. Lin ordered her to go first and deactivate all the traps. The demoness dutifully went inside. A guy with an extremely worried classmate remained to wait for her outside. Soon, the spider went out to them and said that now the path is free and they can move on. The teenager firmly pressed Chu to him, and they slowly headed inside the outcome. Seeing how the girl was shy, Xiao immediately removed her hand from her lower back. Then he asked for forgiveness and said that he simply did not pay attention. The young lady answered. Nothing terrible happened. They continued the path, and Lin constantly looked around, saying that there is a huge number of necessary herbs. Suddenly, Chu asked him how they could find the necessary plants. The young man smiled and said that she should not worry about it, since he has a ring. At this moment, the self-confident Xiao put on the middle finger a spiritual ring and said that he would take everything. The dumbfounded Black Widow said that he could not pick up everything, because they have saved these herbs for years. However, the protagonist raised his hand up and a certain magic began to come from the ring, which collected all the plants. The demoness was shocked by what was happening and asked where the spiritual ring came from. Lin replied, this did not concern her. The widow was horrified, because she believed that after the death of the rest, everything would go to her hands. But in fact, the teenager was much more prudent than his predecessors. Also, before going to the mountains, Xiao improved the ring, and thereby it became more spacious. Having entered the next room, Lin once again did this procedure. After some time, the high school student cleaned several glades, which broke the heart of the monster. Suddenly, the young man asked if she had something else interesting. The Black Widow answered positively, adding that ordinary people could not go there. Naturally, Xiao ordered her to take him to this mysterious place anyway. Approaching the door of the building, the demoness noted that inside there was a thing from the blood of King Gu. Of course, the guy understood what was talking about, because this was a real treasure, with the help of which it was possible to become much stronger. Once behind the door, the protagonist saw a blood pool in front of him. Chu asked what it was. The young master said that inside he sees worms, but this is clearly not their blood, adding that this is a magic well in which you can rise to a great warrior of martial arts. The Black Widow noticed that in fact the pool was created from the blood of the king of 5 poisons. But if the young cultivator really decided to swim in it, then it is better for him not to do this. Xiao asked why. The spider, in turn, began to lie so that the guy would not recognize the true magic of the lake. In this regard, she began to say that the pool is extremely toxic, and if it enters it, it may die. And for this reason, she never dared to plunge into a sea of blood. Chu realized that in this case, recovery does not shine for her, since you can easily burn in the lake. At that moment, her faith staggered, because the girl sincerely hoped for salvation. The demoness, in turn, began to think that she really managed to deceive them. However, Lin suddenly grabbed her with his magic hand and dragged her towards the bloody lake. The dumbfounded Chevdova began to say that she did not lie to him, but Xiao decided to find out if she would survive, plunging into the pool. After all, if the blood does not harm her, then the well is safe. The shocked spider began to beg him to let her go, but the guy suddenly overturned her straight into the miraculous pool. Naturally, the demoness knew that she was waiting, since she personally improved this lake yesterday. However, at the same time in the pool there was a special poison, which was not like any other. After a certain time, the Black Widow emerged from the blood well. She was extremely surprised by what had happened, because the monster was completely unharmed. Then Lin realized that in fact everything was not as the cunning spider said. On the contrary, this Miracle of Zero gave strength and strengthened the health of the diverse, as evidenced by a characteristic golden glow, which means that the body of the demoness improved. But the teenager was embarrassed by a rather strange effect of toxins in the pool. The young man spoke to the classmate that the golden light signals the improvement of the body. But at the same time, the effect of poison really gave rise to many questions. At that moment, Xiao pulled out a demoness from the lake. Then, he invited a classmate to plunge into the pool to become stronger and get rid of ailments. The girl, in turn, suggested making her accompany because he wanted to become a master of martial arts. Lin looked at the suspicious state of the Black Widow and thought, after all, if the immortals find out that he has bathed in this lake, his reputation will be destroyed, so Xiao refused. In addition, he understood that the divine resolution improves independently without the help of such wells. Chu looked sadly at the teenager and came closer to the bloody pool. realizing that in fact she had long been going to become the strongest. In the final result, the young lady decided, nevertheless, to plunge into the miraculous lake. Without thinking twice, Chu went straight to the Blood Lake Strait. But the main character